They didn't know who he was, but when a flight attendant slapped 10-year-old Asher Klein in front of a full cabin, the world was already watching. 10 minutes later, a $3.1 billion airline partnership froze mid-air. Tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever witnessed something like this? Would you speak up? The Frankfurt to Boston flight had just begun boarding when Asher stepped onto the plane. He was small, quiet, and careful. His blue backpack hugged tightly to his chest. His mom always told him, "Be respectful, be invisible if you have to." He found seat 12C in the premium comfort section, like his ticket said. He checked twice, sat neatly, and waited. Then she appeared. Lorna Baxter, the flight attendant in polished heels and a too-tight bun, scanned the row and stopped cold. Her fake smile dropped. "Young man, that's not your seat," she snapped. Asher blinked. "It says 12C on my ticket." Lorna grabbed the slip from his hands and scoffed. "Figures," she muttered under her breath, loud enough to sting. Then, with a sharp motion, she smacked the top of his head. Not a hard slap, but one meant to humiliate. Gasps. One phone lifted. Another passenger lowered their newspaper. "Don't sit where you don't belong," she hissed. "Go find your actual seat." Asher's cheeks flushed red. He didn't cry. He didn't fight. He just stood up and whispered, "Sorry, ma'am." He moved down the aisle, head down, heart pounding. A woman filming near the galley muttered, "Did she just hit that kid?" No one stopped it. No one helped him. What none of them knew was that Asher Klein wasn't just another boy. He was the public face of one of the world's largest child advocacy campaigns. And the moment that slap landed, the gears of a global system began to turn. The airline had 10 minutes of peace left. Then everything would break. Asher found his new seat in row 22, right by the wing. His hands were shaking a little, but he kept his head down, eyes focused on the laminated safety card he wasn't actually reading. A passenger beside him, a middle-aged man in a blazer, glanced over and gave him a nod. Nothing more. No one said a word about what just happened. Up front, the flight attendants resumed their tasks like nothing had happened. Lorna Baxter smiled again, loudly offered sparkling water to a couple in business class, as if the slap never happened, as if the quiet boy she struck was forgettable. But he wasn't. Near the galley, seat 14B. A woman in her late 60s, gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, slowly replayed the video she had just captured on her phone. Her name was Evelyn Stein, a retired teacher from Boston. She had seen a lot in her time, but never that. She didn't know who the boy was, but the moment he whispered, "Sorry, ma'am," and quietly walked away after being humiliated, something shifted in her chest. She didn't hit send just yet. Instead, she typed a message to her daughter. "Tell your newsroom to check this out. Something's not right about this flight." Back in 22C, Asher pulled out a small book, A Wrinkle in Time, but didn't open it. The words would be too blurry to see anyway. Across the aisle, a young couple whispered. "He didn't even flinch," the man said. "That was a grown woman," the woman replied. "Who does that to a kid?" No one dared to raise their voice. Not yet. But somewhere, in a quiet newsroom in Boston, a producer's phone pinged. The clip was shaky, grainy, but clear enough. A uniformed flight attendant striking a child. The audio, unmistakable. Flight 1765 was now under an invisible spotlight, and Asher Klein, still silent in the middle of coach, had no idea that people around the world were about to learn his name, not because he shouted, but because he didn't. The plane touched down at Boston Logan just past 6 o'clock p.m. Asher waited until most of the cabin emptied before stepping into the aisle. His backpack felt heavier than before, though he hadn't added a thing to it. At the gate, a woman in a navy blazer held a sign that read, "Klein." She was tall, early 30s, with a clipboard in one hand and a Bluetooth earpiece in the other. Her name was Rachel Mendez, a UNICEF liaison for the U.S. Northeast region. She smiled when she spotted him, But the moment her eyes met the faint red mark near his temple, that smile vanished. "Asher?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Did someone—" He shook his head. Rachel didn't push. Instead, she crouched to his level, checking his face carefully. Then, standing, she pulled out her phone and took a single photo, just his profile. Nothing invasive, just enough to document. "Come on," she said gently. "Let's get you home." They exited through the side gate, but inside Rachel's phone, an alert was already spreading. A Level 2 flag triggered in the internal Hope Link system, not for a medical emergency or lost child, but for something far more delicate. Public representative of global campaign, minor involved in incident. The name Asher Klein wasn't just any name. It was tied to more than 120 international advocacy programs, to billboard campaigns in 22 countries, to televised PSAs with voiceovers by presidents and poets. His face had appeared in UN conference reels, travel safety campaigns, even airline ads themselves. He was the symbol of Kids of Hope, the living face of dignity, safety, and child respect in modern travel. And he had just been struck by a uniformed staffer, in public, on video. At a logistics office in New York, someone's screen turned red. Geneva got pinged. Rachel's phone buzzed. A quiet notification from HQ. Flagged. Incident involving Klein. Confirm visual. Forward details within 30 minutes. Rachel swallowed hard. She looked down at the boy walking beside her, completely unaware. He hadn't cried, hadn't spoken of what happened, but somewhere in the system, the clock had already started ticking. The world was about to remember his name. Rachel hadn't even buckled her seatbelt in the black sedan when her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a HopeLink Level 1 escalation. She froze. The only time she'd seen one of those was during a major incident in Nairobi involving a refugee transport gone wrong. But this... She glanced at Asher in the back seat, quietly scrolling through an e-book on his tablet. The red mark on his temple had faded slightly, but it was still there. So was the silence. Rachel tapped the notification. A secure message from Geneva lit up her screen. Incident confirmed. Subject identified as Asher Klein. Suspend all related partnerships. Initiate fund freeze protocol. 10 minutes. That's how long it took. From a slap in an airplane aisle to $3.1 billion in pending funding being locked across 14 international airline groups. The HopeLink dashboard lit up across offices in New York, Geneva, Brussels, and Singapore. The airline in question, Voyant Air, was already under review for a pending partnership renewal. Now, their internal status flipped to suspended under ethics review. Rachel's earpiece chimed. "Rachel, this is HQ. Is Asher secure?" "Yes, he's with me. We're heading home. You need to brief Geneva within the hour. They want timeline, images, witness names, everything." Rachel swallowed hard. "Understood." In the back seat, Asher finally looked up. "Miss Rachel?" he said softly. "Yeah? I didn't do anything wrong, right?" She turned in her seat, heart sinking. "No, sweetheart, you didn't, and you don't have to worry. You're not the one in trouble." He nodded, not fully convinced. Rachel's phone buzzed again. Another internal memo. Flag. Media interest detected. Keywords Klein. Flight. And incident trending. Prepare for visibility spike. And that was just the beginning. Somewhere in an office above Manhattan, a senior partnership manager opened her dashboard and froze. She clicked into the report and recognized the boy's face. "Oh no," she whispered. "They slapped that kid?" And just like that, the countdown began. Not just for one flight attendant, but for an entire airline. At 7:14 p.m. Eastern, the video went live. Evelyn Stein, the retired teacher who had filmed the incident from seat 14B, didn't post it on her own page. She sent it to her daughter, Naomi Stein, a digital producer for the Boston Post. Naomi wasn't sure what to expect. until she watched it. The clip was short, only 46 seconds. But the moment Lorna Baxter's hand struck the boy's head, Naomi felt her jaw clench. She didn't even hear the slap. She heard the silence that followed. The boy, small, polite, obviously scared, had whispered, "Sorry, ma'am," and then disappeared down the aisle, alone. Naomi didn't know who he was. Not yet. But she did what her gut told her. She posted the video to the Post's official Twitter account, captioned simply, "Flight attendant strikes child on Voyant Air Flight 1765. His response? Heartbreaking." Within minutes, it had 10,000 views. By the 15-minute mark, it had reached 100,000. People started commenting fast. "Why isn't anyone doing anything? That child didn't even fight back. This is disgusting." Name the airline, name the crew. And then someone recognized him. A user named @GlobalHopeVolunteer commented, "Wait, that's Asher Klein, the kid from the Kids of Hope campaign. I met him at the UNICEF summit last year." That's when the floodgates opened. Journalists, educators, NGO reps, parents. Even airline insiders began tagging accounts and asking questions. And someone reposted the campaign launch video from 2 years ago. Asher Klein standing next to world leaders, holding a sign that read, "Dignity isn't optional." The contrast was brutal. The boy who symbolized kindness and protection in the skies had just been slapped by a uniformed flight attendant. Naomi leaned back from her desk, staring at the screen as the view count ticked into 6 figures. She whispered, "Oh God, they hit that kid." By the next morning, the clip had passed 3 million views. It was on every major platform: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. The hashtags, #WhoIsAsher, #HopeWasSlapped, and "Dignity First" were trending across the US, UK, and parts of Europe. And Voyant Air was officially in crisis mode. The airline's social media pages were flooded with comments. Parents were furious. Advocacy groups were issuing statements. News anchors were asking, "Who is Asher Klein?" So the CEO responded. At 9:42 a.m., Voyant Air released a formal statement attributed to CEO Derek O.I. Caldwell. "We regret any misunderstanding that may have occurred on Flight 1765. The crew's actions will be reviewed internally. Voyant Air values all passengers, especially our younger flyers." 3 sentences, all corporate. No mention of the slap. No apology to Asher. No accountability. The backlash was immediate. "This isn't a misunderstanding, it's assault. Review internally? We all saw the video. You value kids? You hit the face of a global children's campaign." But what really detonated the firestorm was a photo. A journalist unearthed an image from 2 years prior. A smiling Derek Caldwell, personally handing Asher a plaque during the launch of the Kids of Hope Airline initiative. The caption read, "CEO Caldwell honors 8-year-old Asher Klein, Hope Ambassador for Global Air Safety Campaign." The internet exploded. You knew who he was. You smiled for the photo, then let your staff strike him. This wasn't a mistake. This was betrayal. The clip was reshared again, this time with a split screen. On one side, Asher smiling in a UNICEF campaign. On the other, him being struck and whispered, "Sorry, ma'am." The contrast broke hearts. By noon, Voyant Air's stock dropped 6%. Media outlets were calling it the Hope Slap scandal. But Asher? He still hadn't said a word. He didn't need to. The truth was louder than anything he could have said. By day 3, Lorna Baxter's name was everywhere. TikTok, Reddit, local news, late-night monologues. Some called her the slapping stewardess. Others were less kind. Voyant Air had no choice. Their press inbox had over 9,000 messages. Sponsors were quietly backing out of campaigns. Travel agencies started flagging the airline with discretion warnings. So, at exactly 10:07 a.m., the airline issued an internal memo. Lorna Baxter was officially terminated, effective immediately. The statement called her behavior inconsistent with our values. But again, no public apology to Asher. Lorna wasn't the only one who got called in. The head of cabin operations at Voyant resigned quietly. HR staff who mishandled past complaints were placed on administrative review. And then the dominoes really started falling. A whistleblower inside Voyant's HR team leaked that Lorna had 2 prior complaints, both involving excessive force toward minor passengers. Neither had been investigated. Now, media outlets had a bigger question. Was this a pattern or a system? Within 48 hours, the Civil Aviation Ethics Board launched a formal review. They announced they would re-examine child safety protocols across all Voyant flights. Staff conduct training over the past 5 years, and, most damning, treatment of minor passengers during upgrades or reassignments. Meanwhile, 3 other flight attendants who had worked with Lorna were suspended pending investigation. But it didn't stop with Voyant. Other airlines who had partnered with the Kids of Hope campaign began quietly pulling staff files, bracing for scrutiny. Several fast-tracked internal audits. Behind closed doors, executives weren't asking if heads would roll. They were asking whose, and all of it. Every ripple, every resignation, every urgent meeting started with a boy who never raised his voice. Asher hadn't spoken to the press, hadn't posted, hadn't even flinched. But somehow, without saying a word, he had the whole industry listening. 5 days after the video went viral, a podium was set up inside the Geneva headquarters of the Kids of Hope Global Initiative. Dozens of journalists waited. Cameras clicked. The blue and white backdrop behind the speaker read, "Dignity in every cabin, safety for every child." At precisely 9:00 a.m., Dr. Elaine Moreau, Director of Global Strategy for Kids of Hope, stepped up to the microphone. She didn't waste time. As of this morning, we are suspending all airline partnerships that do not meet our revised passenger dignity standards. We are introducing the Asher Protocol, a mandatory ethics framework to protect children in air travel. The room fell silent. This protocol, she continued, was inspired by one quiet boy who endured what no child should. His name is Asher Klein, and because of him, this industry will never be the same. The Asher Protocol included mandatory in-cabin camera systems to monitor staff conduct, real-time passenger dignity ratings tracked by an independent ethics board, permanent blacklisting of any airline or staff member found to violate child protection standards, and a new global database, Children's Passenger Rights Registry, accessible to guardians worldwide. Moreau didn't mention Voyant Air by name. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. Within hours, 6 airlines confirmed compliance. 3 others requested audits. Voyant remained silent. But behind the scenes, they were hemorrhaging contracts. Travel platforms began tagging them as under ethics watch. A U.S. senator introduced legislation requiring American-based airlines to adopt versions of the Asher Protocol or face FAA penalties. In Geneva, after the announcement, a private message was sent to Asher's family. "Your son reminded us that dignity doesn't need a voice to demand attention. We're listening now." Meanwhile, Asher remained at home in Brookline, unaware that his name had become global policy. He wasn't on social media. He wasn't watching the news. He was outside, shooting hoops in the driveway. But halfway around the world, grown men in suits were scrambling. Because of him. The ballroom at the Geneva Children's Forum was standing room only. News crews from 5 continents packed every corner. Everyone knew the event was about the global rollout of the Asher Protocol, but no one expected the woman at the microphone. She stood poised in a navy dress, curls tucked behind her ears. No publicist, no teleprompter, just a quiet dignity. "My name is Dr. Meredith Klein," she said. "I'm a child psychologist, a mother, and the legal guardian of Asher Klein." There was a ripple through the room. People leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. "He didn't want to come today," she smiled faintly. "He said, 'You can go, Mom. I'm tired of hearing about me.' And you know what? I get it." A few chuckles, a release of tension. Meredith's tone shifted, steadier. When I first adopted Asher, I told him something I truly believed. The world isn't always kind, but we can be. I taught him to be respectful, to stay calm, to choose peace. She paused, looked straight ahead. But that doesn't mean we stay silent. She let that land before continuing. What happened on Flight 1765 wasn't just a slap. It was a reminder that children, especially quiet, respectful ones, are often treated as less than, disposable, unimportant, even when they represent everything we claim to stand for. The audience sat in pin-drop silence. Asher didn't raise his voice. He didn't retaliate. And that silence did more than any scream could have. It held up a mirror to all of us. A long breath. You want to know the truth? As a mother, I was furious, but I was also proud, because my son reminded the world that dignity doesn't require volume, it just requires that we notice. She held up a folded piece of paper. This is the official notice that the Klein Family Trust will permanently cut ties with any airline that refuses to adopt the Asher Protocol. Our funding matters, but so does our integrity. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards. We're not doing this out of anger, Meredith finished. We're doing it to protect children who don't have cameras watching, who don't have hashtags, who still get ignored every day. A standing ovation erupted. Backstage, Dr. Elaine Moreau whispered, "She just closed the deal for 20 countries." And in a small apartment back in Brookline, Asher sat at the kitchen table, eating cereal and reading A Wrinkle in Time again. He didn't know his mom's speech had just gone viral. He didn't know travel policy was rewriting itself in real time. But Meredith's voice echoed far beyond that room. My son never needed the spotlight, but now that it's here, we'll use it to make sure no other child is ever slapped. Then silenced. Should more parents speak up like Meredith did? Comment, I would, if you believe silent kids deserve louder defenders. 3 days after Dr. Meredith Klein's speech, an unexpected video quietly appeared on YouTube. No logos, no press team, just a man in uniform sitting at a kitchen table, his flight cap resting beside a mug of untouched coffee. My name is Captain Robert Lennox, he began, his voice calm but tired. I was the pilot on Flight 1765. The video was barely 2 minutes long, but within hours, it had over 3.2 million views. I've been a commercial pilot for 28 years, he said. I've flown diplomats, refugees, grieving families, honeymooners, but nothing prepared me for the moment I saw a child flinch after being slapped by a member of my crew. He looked down for a moment, then back up. I didn't react fast enough. I didn't step in, and for that, I owe Asher and every kid on every flight I've ever flown an apology. He paused. When I walked to the back cabin and saw him sitting alone, shoulders hunched, eyes red, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Shame. I asked him, "Are you all right, son?" And he just nodded and said, "I think I made her mad." A heavy silence in the video. No child should ever believe they're responsible for being hit. Captain Lennox continued, more resolute now. After that flight, I filed an internal report and urged management to suspend the attendant. I was told, quote, "We'll handle it." They didn't. He slid a document into frame, a printed copy of his resignation letter. I won't be flying for Voyant Air again, but I will be joining the advisory board for the Asher Protocol, starting next month. He took a breath, then ended with, I can't change what happened at 30,000 feet, but I can help change what happens next. The comment section flooded. Real accountability, rare and needed. Finally, someone from inside the system steps up. You just did what your airline refused to do. Tell the truth. But it didn't stop there. 2 more pilots from Voyant issued statements supporting Lennox. One union rep called for a review of ethical co-pilot intervention training. Even a former FAA commissioner reposted the clip, captioning, "This is leadership. This is what courage at altitude looks like." Asher never saw the video that day. He was building a Lego set with his best friend, laughing about a spaceship with a crooked wing. But somewhere in the sky, rules were shifting, and the pilots flying those skies were finally saying, "Not on our watch." Inside a high-rise boardroom in Washington, D.C., the mood was tense. This wasn't a press event. No cameras, just 12 members of the Federal Aviation Oversight Council seated around a polished mahogany table. At the head sat Chairwoman Darlene Vickers, a woman known for her sharp suits and sharper questions. "Let's get one thing straight," she began. "This isn't about punishing one airline. This is about exposing the blind spots in all of them." In front of each council member was a binder labeled Case Klein via Voyant Air, thick with transcripts, flight logs, and over 40 testimonies, not just from Flight 1765, but from similar incidents across the past 3 years. As Vickers flipped a page, she said quietly, "The child didn't scream, didn't fight back, and yet this became a global incident." One councilman murmured, "Because the silence made it louder." Nods followed. For years, cases like Asher's were either dismissed or settled quietly. But now, with the public watching, Congress pressuring, and social media archiving every slip, the game had changed, and so had the expectations. That same morning, 2 major unions representing flight crews issued a joint statement. "We support the Asher Protocol and call for a national ethics retraining mandate." 5 major airlines pledged full compliance. Voyant remained uncommitted, until stockholders threatened to pull out if they didn't act fast. Later that week, Chairwoman Vickers appeared before a bipartisan Senate subcommittee and delivered her recommendations. Creation of an independent passenger conduct bureau. A nationwide dignity on board scorecard viewable by the public legislation to ensure whistleblower protection for cabin crew and passengers alike. The name of the proposal? The Asher Air Safety and Dignity Act. Within 24 hours, the proposal gained 37 co-sponsors. Meanwhile, news outlets began connecting the dots. This wasn't about one slap. This was about a system that had allowed power to go unchecked in the air. Former attendants came forward. Parents shared stories. Civil rights groups filed amicus briefs. And then came the story that shook the industry to its core. An anonymous HR executive at Voyant leaked an internal risk memo, drafted 6 months before the Asher incident, that warned, increased reliance on unverified contractors in child safety zones may expose the company to ethics-based litigation. They knew. They didn't act. The public backlash was instant. Online forums exploded. One post read, "This wasn't oversight. It was apathy." Back in Brookline, Dr. Meredith Klein sat in the living room, scrolling through the day's headlines while Asher worked on a school project beside her. She looked over and smiled. "You're changing more than you know, kid." Asher glanced up. "Am I in trouble?" Meredith laughed softly. "No, baby. You're why the system's finally listening." He nodded, thoughtful. "Can I still go to camp this summer?" She ruffled his hair. "You bet. You've got a whole world to explore." As policy drafts moved through Capitol Hill, airlines rewrote training manuals, and ethics scoreboards went live on travel sites. One thing became clear. This wasn't just reform. It was a reckoning. A gentle breeze rustled the trees in Brookline as Asher Klein sat cross-legged on the school stage, legs bouncing nervously. It was end-of-year assembly day, and every 6th grader had been asked to submit one sentence describing what they learned this year. Most kids wrote about math, field trips, or their favorite books. Asher's paper simply said, "People are listening, even when you don't say anything." His teacher had to double-check it wasn't a quote. Across the gymnasium, Dr. Meredith Klein stood in the back row with her arms folded, watching quietly as the principal called Asher's name. He stood, awkward and a little shy, and walked to the podium. There were no cheers, no spotlight, just a warm silence. "Asher," the principal said, holding up the paper, "this is probably the most profound sentence I've read in all my years of doing this." The crowd clapped politely. Asher gave a tiny smile. and walked back to his seat. That evening, back at home, Meredith tucked him in and kissed his forehead. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "I didn't want to say anything big. I just wanted it to be normal again." Meredith smiled. "You've already done the big stuff, sweetheart. What comes next is yours to enjoy." Outside, the world was still catching up. The Asher Air Safety and Dignity Act had passed both chambers of Congress. Voyant Air issued a public apology and began funding a new ethics training center under Asher's name. And across airports in Europe, Asia, and South America, terminals now displayed stickers reading, "This airline complies with the Asher Protocol." But none of that was on Asher's mind. He was thinking about his upcoming soccer tryouts, the camp he'd finally get to attend this summer, and the Lego kit he never quite finished. Because he never asked to be the face of a movement. He didn't want to become a headline. He just wanted his seat back. And in a world that too often demands anger to ignite change, it was his quiet that turned into a roar. Not from a microphone, not from a protest, but from the ripple of a still moment that refused to be ignored. 6 months later, in a crowded airport lounge in Dubai, a flight attendant noticed a young boy gripping his boarding pass with shaky hands. He looked nervous. Alone. She knelt down beside him. "First flight?" He nodded. She smiled warmly. "What's your name?" He whispered. "Eli." "Well, Eli," she said, gently helping him up. "Your seat is right up front. You're safe here, and if anyone ever treats you otherwise." She paused, tapped the badge on her vest. "We fly Asher Standard now. Would you fly with an airline that honors the Asher Standard?" Comment. He changed everything if you believe one silent child really can change the world.